Okay, in this video, we're going to go through Google Analytics training. This is actually part of our course linked down in the description below. This is Google Analytics goals and conversions. So we'll walk you through setting up goals inside of Google Analytics, all the different goals there are. You can do the custom events, you can do destination URL, tracking form submissions, or people signing up for your email newsletter or sales for e-commerce. We'll go through all the most common ways to set up goals in analytics. That way you have everything set up, ready to go. If you're running ads or doing SEO, you'll have all the tracking in there. So this is from our actual training course. So we're going to walk you through a sample of that for getting started with setting up basic goals in Google Analytics in this part 1 video. Okay, in this next training, we're going to go through setting up tracking goals inside Google Analytics. So we'll first go over best practices for Google Analytics goals, and then we'll do a walkthrough on setting up tracking goals inside Google Analytics. So let's start off with best practices for goals inside Google Analytics, things you want to remember while you're setting these up, or just learn more about them if you're not familiar with setting up goals in Google Analytics. So you'll typically set up custom goals when you go in and set up the different options. This is so you can decide exactly what type of goal you want to track. There are some presets in there, but most commonly you're going to do a custom goal. And this is most commonly used to track if a website visitor submits a form. There's lots of other things you can track, but most of the time for lead generation, that's when you do a custom form setup. You want to know if someone booked a demo, they booked a call with your sales team, or if you're connecting it to third-party software, you want to know, did they make a phone call? Or just something that indicates they became a new lead. So that's very common to track lead generation by submitting a form as a goal inside Google Analytics. So you know if you're actually getting any leads, if you're getting any new business, new clients, things like that from your website. E-commerce tracking is actually enabled inside the e-commerce settings tab. This typically links directly to your platform, such as Shopify, Magento, whatever you're using. So e-commerce tracking has its own setting. The goal setup, that's more so if you're doing something besides e-commerce and you need to track a unique action, typically if they submitted a form. So with goals, you're just setting up tracking on did a person do a specific action. So they came to your website, did they fill out the form? Or did they call you? Or did they book a demo? Or something like that. You want to know that so you know how many leads you got and are your advertising dollars turning into more business. You can also import all of the goals into Google Ads. That way the data is shared so you know inside the Google Ads platform how everything's working. But if you have the goals set up, you can also see how many goals are being completed from other sources. If you're also doing SEO, email, Facebook, YouTube, different things like that, you can see how many goals or forms or sales came from other sources as well. Also something that's best practice that for some reason has gone away, when you're setting up a web form, always have the form redirect to a new thank you page URL, rather than it having just display a pop-up indicating the form was successfully submitted. For some reason, a lot of forms, especially with WordPress and other website builders, they just pop up, your form was submitted, and then it disappears. When you redirect to a confirmation URL, a different page, it's significantly easier to track. Actually, if it doesn't have that redirect, it's actually very, very complicated to set that up, and you'll need a programmer to do that. And even then, they'll have a difficult time doing the custom code. If you redirect it to a new URL, it's extremely easy to track whether or not someone submitted a form or made a purchase. So this is great for setting up remarketing audiences, meaning if they reached that thank you page, you can put them in a different audience to block them or retarget them later with something else. And honestly, it's just a better user experience. The pop-up's kind of confusing, or it could get blocked. When you go to a thank you page, there's an option to upsell, or just explain what happens next. You can put a video. Thank you for scheduling a demo. Thank you for reaching out. Our sales team will contact you shortly to tell you more about our products or services. Having a thank you page, really any legitimate company will have one. The pop-up is kind of a lazy way to just say the form was submitted. It's a very bad user experience. It's hard to track. So if your form does not redirect, definitely switch the plugin, buy a new one, change the setting, or redo it, or tell your web developer it has to redirect to a new URL when the form is submitted. It's a much better user experience. There's opportunities for upselling, for multi-part forms. If you want to get more information, you can have a small form on the front and more information on the back end of it. The tracking is much easier. It's just all around a better experience. So make sure you redirect to a confirmation URL like a thank you page. Do not leave it on the default where it just pops up and says the form submitted successfully. So this training video is actually going to be a sample from our actual training program, so you can get a better idea of what's in here, what we offer. Some of these are more beginner lessons, and they'll go into more advanced. So if you need more advanced training, we do have a link below in the description that will give you access to discounts and different things like that from our advanced training and all of our different programs. It's going to be a link down in the description below. So different type of custom goals include a destination, meaning they reached a certain part of your website. Most commonly, your website.com/thank-you or confirmation or success or something like that. If they reach that specific URL, they made a purchase, or they submitted a form, or they scheduled a demo, or they signed up, whatever it is. If they reach that destination, you count that as a goal. That's why it's critical to redirect to this destination. Otherwise, you're going to have a very hard time setting up tracking. Duration, that's kind of a secondary goal. I wouldn't really optimize that. It's just something you might want to set up to be aware of. If the duration is at least 30 seconds or 1 minute, might want to keep an eye on that so people are on the site a longer time, but not really a primary objective. Same thing with pages, screens per session. It's good to have people go to 3, 4, 5 different pages, something like that, especially with e-commerce. But again, not really a goal to optimize for. Make sure people go to lots of pages. You want to make sure you're usually going to do destination or event, making sure they got to thank you page or order confirmation page. An event, that's something else you could track as kind of a smaller goal. Did they watch the video? Did they click a certain button? Did they reach a certain part of your page? Different things like that. It's a secondary goal to wonder kind of what they're doing on the page, but most of the time you're going to set up the destination, and it's going to be for the thank you page or the order confirmation page. Whatever the URL is, they go to after completing the action. So their order finished, or they filled out the form. That's the most common one you're going to set up and optimize all of your advertising for. These other ones are just good secondary ones to add to have some more info. So with the destination custom goal, it does have a couple of different options. It's equals to, this uses the exact URL. So if it doesn't change, it's just thank you or something like that, you can use that. Begins with, meaning the first part of it is your website.com/thank-you. That's if you have a CRM or you have different tracking where it adds a bunch of code at the end of the URL, maybe the person's name, where they're from, all this other stuff is added per user. That's when you would do begins with, or maybe the product they purchased is towards the end. Begins with might be a better option. Or you might even use a regular expression. This is really similar to the URL contains. like Facebook ads and other ones do contains. So a regular expression, you would just put in thank you or thank-you or confirmation, just one word. And if the URL contains that one word, then it's going to count it. So just be careful with that. If for some reason thank you is in some other random URL, like maybe a blog or maybe a thank you sale to current customers or something like that, you don't want it to trigger that. But a regular expression can be used if the URL just contains thank you or confirmation or thank you, order completed, something like that. You don't have to type in the whole URL, just the part of it that contains whatever it is you're trying to track. So it just kind of depends on how your website's set up. I mean, you'll usually do begins with or a regular expression, because a lot of different tracking will add a bunch of stuff to the end of the URL. So equals to won't work in that case. Another option would be an event custom goal. If you are setting this up, it's a lot more complicated and you'll need some custom code. So you need a developer that can write code, or you'll know how to use Google Tag Manager, which is a lot more advanced, or maybe even third-party software will give you the instructions for how to set this up. But once you have it set up somewhere else, this is where you put everything into Google Analytics. So you have the category, kind of what it is. For example, it's a button. The category is it's a button. The action is they clicked it. So category, button, action, clicked. And you could put a label and a value if you want. But maybe there's a button at the bottom to get more info, or maybe you have play a video or something like that to where you want to know, did somebody take an action? It's not submitting a form. It's not making a purchase. It's not reached a certain URL, because there's other setups that will do that. It's something unique. Oftentimes it's like when they click on a button, or this is what you have to do if you don't do the URL redirect on your form. This is significantly more complicated, and it doesn't always work to track if the button was clicked for submitting a form. Just do the URL instead. But if you are familiar with this, or you have third-party software that will track this, call tracking software uses this. The category is call. The action is, they called you. Call tracking, and the action is a phone call. So if you have call tracking, it uses this. You'll create a custom event, and depending on the software, it tells you exactly what to put in here and connect it all. But events are just kind of, if it doesn't fall into a destination URL, then it would track as a event. So it's much more complicated. If you're just doing form submissions or something, you don't need to do this. If you're doing call tracking software, they'll walk you through exactly what to put in here and then save it, so it'll track all the calls on your website. Also, as we mentioned before, different CRMs, call tracking software, and other third-party tools can be imported to Google Analytics as goals. We won't get into that because the third-party software, it'll either link directly to it and just you'll do a basic setup, or it'll walk you through with screenshots and videos, or their support will walk you through how to connect it to your Google Analytics account. So, this tracking includes phone calls on your actual website, maybe a completed sale from your leads, not e-commerce, meaning they were a lead and they made a purchase and became a customer a month later or something like that. Or just other offline goal completions can be imported into Google Analytics through third-party tools, just in case you have some goals you want to track that don't necessarily happen directly on your website, or it needs more software to be able to track that, like a phone call. So when you're looking at your website traffic, this is just a source medium report. This is the most common one to look at. Just a sample here. Your conversions, you could select all goals or a specific goal. Maybe did they book an appointment, or did they download a white paper, or did they make it to the directions page? You can separate that, and it'll show you how many goal completions there were per source. So maybe organic, a lot of people are just downloading a white paper, getting directions. With Google Ads, a lot of people, you can shift it to a different goal to see how many people are buying or how many people are booking an appointment. Or you could just look at all the goals at the same time, but Google Analytics will separate all the different data per source so you can see which goals and how many goals are coming from each source. So next we'll look at setting up tracking goals inside your Google Analytics account. So I'll do a quick walkthrough on adding some of the different goals, the more common ones for tracking your website traffic. So we're inside our Google Analytics test account. Normally you'd have traffic data, but this is just a sample website, so it doesn't have anything on here. You'd go to the left and click on Admin. And this has we have other videos going through all these different setups, but it'd be over here on the right under Goals. So you'd create a new goal. I'll walk you through some of the basics. Maybe this one's just submitted form or book demo or something like that. Here's all the different options we talked about. Let's do destination in this case. Even the example right here, it says thanks. That's the most common one by far. So submitted a form. That's just the internal title, whatever you want to call it that makes sense. Make sure you give it, book demo, free trial, something you can tell what this is. Don't just say goal 1 and then goal 2 and goal 3. You won't know what they are. And this is internal. Nobody else sees it. And click continue. So this is the destination URL. You can put in equals to, begins with, or regular expression. We'll just do begins with to make it simpler. And if you look here, the example, it knows the first part of your website, www.example.com/thankyou. It tells you don't have to put in that entire URL, just put what's after that. So, for example, the example.com / that's what it's saying. It already knows your website name. It just wants to know the rest of the address. So you don't need the entire thing. Like it says here, you would just need the thank you part. So begins with thank you. And the reason we're doing begins with is sometimes you see, all this other product ID and then maybe, source and then all this other stuff at the end of the URL for tracking. So it's going to change per person. That's why we're just doing begins with. So it already knows the full name of our website. We don't need the W's and everything. It just wants to know what specific page was it. It's the thank you page, or it might be the confirmation page. All this is the URL, the address, whatever it goes to, for example, after the form is submitted. So maybe it just goes to confirmation, or it goes to thank you, or it goes to form submitted successfully. Whatever it is on your website, that's what you're going to put into here. The value in the funnel, that's a little bit more complicated if you want to analyze all the different steps. You don't have to do that. You can verify it to see if someone actually submitted the form. You should have this set up before you run advertising in the first place, but you can double check just to see if it actually tracked it, and then click save. So now you have submitted form, which what it's doing, you can click on it again, click on the details. If someone gets to the page, the URL that has confirmation in it, it begins with that. All the rest of it at the end doesn't really matter. Just it begins with confirmation. If they reach that page, then you're tracking it as a goal. And the only way to reach that page is if you submitted a form. That's why it's critical to redirect your forms to a confirmation page. Otherwise, this is a nightmare to set up tracking and it doesn't always work. So always redirect it to a confirmation page. Redo your form, hire a programmer to do it, buy a different plugin, make sure you can redirect it to a different URL. So that's the most common one by far. If they submitted a form, you can do different forms. If they booked a sales call, if they requested more info, if they scheduled a demo, if they signed up for a free trial, you would want to separate those into different goals, especially if they're different levels. There's the free trial and there's booked a sales call or booked a demo or signed up for the webinar. You'd want to make sure that all these different ones have different URLs. So maybe signed up for a webinar or something like that, or whatever the URL is for that, or booked a demo, maybe book demo or success or something like that. Make sure they have different thank you pages, so you know, did they book a demo, did they book a sales call, did they sign up for the webinar, what exactly did they do? And that's why you want to have all these different forms that go to different thank you pages. Makes the tracking much easier. So most commonly you'll put in one or two of these destination URL goals. So you know, did someone reach the confirmation page or the thank you page? For third-party software like call tracking, that's going to be an event. You'll just go right here to event, or sorry, let's just do, it's a phone call, event, click continue. And your call tracking software or your CRM or your email software, if they're saying set up an event, they'll tell you what to put in the category, action, label, value, or if you want to track a different value, maybe it's a different sale or something like total or number like that. The third-party software will walk you through what to put in here, and then just click save, and it will track your custom goal inside of Google Analytics. So if it's a phone call or whatever it is, they'll tell you what to put. So these will track inside of Google Analytics, but you definitely want to import them into Google Ads and connect Google Analytics to Google Ads so you have data in both platforms. So you have a different video on how to do that. There's a lot of different steps and things you can import. So that's in the connecting Google Analytics and Google Ads video. But this is the basics of setting up goals so you can start tracking your goals from your website traffic and your different marketing efforts to know is it actually paying off and getting more customers or more sales. All right, everyone, thanks so much for watching our PPC ads training video. If you want more videos, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Like this video if you found it useful, and any questions, post them in the comments down below. We also have additional training, promos, links, things like that in the description, as well as any other tools for PPC tools or software that we referenced in our videos. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.